If you use Midi, you probably have two different problems. Either you sound too sloppy or too robotic. In today's video, we're going to be talking about my favorite trick for tightening up my Midi performance without making it sound like it was performed by a band of robots. Stick around to find out. Hello everybody, Dylan Pines here with Musician on a Mission, and I've got another tutorial for you. Today we're going to be talking about Midi, and specifically why Midi is so often so rough sounding. Why does it so often sound so bad? Sometimes it's because it's way too loose, because it's been performed badly, and other times it's because it's way too tight because of something known as quantization. But there is a solution that we're going to be talking about in this video. But before we get started, I want to let you know we're giving away a free bonus, and it's a big one today. We're giving away our entire treasure trove of mixing cheat sheets for free. So all the stuff that Musician on a Mission has been designing over the last several years, all those cheat sheets, we are giving them to you. So if you click the link on screen or down in the description below, you're going to get some fantastic cheat sheets on stuff like compression, EQ, reverb, delay, gain staging, volume balancing, and everything in between. Several of these cheat sheets even I use every single time that I mix. Be especially on the lookout for the EQ balance chart. That one's my favorite. So just click that link to get our entire collection for free. So let's talk about every producer's frenemy, quantization. So quantization, to put it simply, just allows you to place all of your Midi notes directly onto the grid. So let's take this piano, for example. You can see right here, all these Midi notes are pretty far off of the grid. They're, not the best performed, but if I wanted to quantize it, I could put it to where it was directly onto the grid. So I would just come over here, I'd hit Q. Look at that. Just immediately, everything gets right on and it's perfectly in time. But the problem with that is that even though that's so easy, it also makes everything sound extremely robotic. It's so easy to tell when someone has overly quantized a particular Midi performance because everything just sounds kind of lifeless. Even if it's been performed well, it's still going to be weird sounding just because players in the real world can't actually play as perfectly as quantizing can make these particular sounds sound. So let me show you what I'm talking about. I've got 3 different versions of the same little song here. I was working on a little jazz track in my spare time just for fun. At first, the performance that I did was honestly pretty bad, and then I quantized it to the grid, but you're gonna hear that kind of made it sound lifeless, and then I did something that I'm going to show you in between. And honestly, it's a huge, huge help, and you're gonna tell that this one just feels the best. So let me show you what these sound like. So let's talk about these 3 different versions. Obviously, the first version was really sloppy. I did not perform it very well. I'm not a piano player. I'm not a drummer. And so because the performance was so out of alignment, we lost the emotional quality that I was going for. So then I went in and I quantized all of these individual tracks to the grid. But what happened with this one is, even though everything it was aligned, it felt very inhuman, right? It felt like a loop. It felt like something that I had maybe programmed into the computer rather than performed. But this final version, this version felt a lot more human. It felt like what I was trying to accomplish whenever I was writing. So what exactly did I do differently? That thing is known as Quantize Strength. And it's something that I use nearly 100% of the time that I quantize anything. So I'm gonna go over here and I'm gonna look at this piano. This is from my original recording, so it's not really all that well performed. It's pretty far off the grid. Let's listen. right? The timing is kind of all over the place. So of course, first thought, I need to quantize it. So I would grab all this stuff on Logic Pro, I'd go over here and I'd hit Q, or I'd hit Q on my keyboard. You could see that moves everything onto the grid. So if I undo that, you can see the difference, just like that. But when I play it now, it sounds fake, it sounds robotic. Way too perfect, lost all the human element. So here is what you need to do. In Logic Pro, and every DAW has this, it might have a different name, you might need to do just a little bit of Googling on your side, but in Logic Pro, there's a thing over here that says strength. So I'm gonna grab this and look at what happens whenever I move this down from 100 towards 0. You can see it slowly starts to move back to the original position. If I move it back, it starts to move towards the grid. So here's what is amazing about this. I can basically say, okay, I want to tighten up my performance. I want it to get closer to the grid, but I don't want it to be exactly on it. I don't want it to be so perfect that it is impossible for a human to have ever performed it. But I could get it pretty close, right? Because a pro performer is going to have a pretty tight performance, just not absolutely perfect. So if I set this to something like, let's say 80, which is basically just saying 80% closer to the grid, well, now I'm going to have something that just feels more human. Even if it's subconscious, it just feels a little bit less fake. And at this point, I might be able to say like, okay, well, that's maybe still a little bit too robotic. I'm going to take this back down, let's say to 60. See what that sounds like. See, I love that because it introduces just a little bit of sloppy. And, you know, that gives it some character. So by using Quantize Strength, I've introduced not only technicality, but a level of humanity into my performance. And this is something that I'm going to do with every single one of my tracks, and it helps me get a solid performance. So is there a rule of thumb? Well, I will typically go with somewhere between 40% and 80%. I don't usually go more than 80. I think that starts to sound a little bit too fake. And less than 40%, yeah, it doesn't usually help you out that much unless your performance is already really tight and you're just trying to get a little bit more tightness out of it. Now, the only important thing I am going to say is that it's important that you set the right time parameter. So over here, you can see I've got a lot of different note durations that I can use. I've got quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th notes, which this is usually the default. I've got triplets. I've got different swing patterns. I have a lot of different options, and it's really important that you pick the one that's right for your song. There are some songs that, you know, maybe have kind of a tuplet feel. They've got sort of like a da 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 kind of feel to it. You might want to grab a triplet instead. There are some songs where, you know, you might only be using quarter notes or eighth notes. And if your performance is really off using a 16th note, well, it might actually quantize your note towards the wrong place. So for example, if I had this one right here, let's say I hit this note just really far off of my entire performance where it should have been. Well, if I tried to quantize that at a 16th note, it thinks that this should be aligning with an entirely different place on the grid. So in that case, I'm going to want to go and grab an eighth note, or at least grab it for that particular note. You can see that kind of messes up some of my other notes. So, you know, then I get a fake sound like this, which is obviously not what I want. So if that's happening, really what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select this one note and quantize that to an eighth note. So really just figure out what's going to work best for your song and for that particular performance. And that's pretty much it. That's how you can take a sloppy sounding song like this one and turn it into something tight but still human, like this one. So that's all you need to learn about Quantize Strength. But before you go, don't forget, we are giving away our entire treasure trove of mixing cheat sheets. Stuff on EQ and compression, reverb and delay, and everything in between. You can find it in this packet. And we're giving it away for free. So just click the link on screen or down in the description below to get your own personal access. And trust me, some of these things are things that even I use every single time that I mix. And also, if you're new here, consider liking and subscribing. We make tutorials like this one every single week on this channel. We would really love to help you grow. So that's going to do it for me. This has been Dylan Pines with Musician on a Mission. And remember, create regardless.